You said to me, you know what I say to all my friends is, if you're not unbelievably passionate, and I mean unbelievably passionate about something else, why not healthcare? Where better to dedicate a career? And it really stuck with me.
Healthcare is an industry where the vast majority of people work there because they want to make a difference. Being a doctor is a hard job. It is not rewarding in many ways. It is incredibly frustrating. You start with a mountain of debt. So healthcare, macroeconomically, should grow faster than GDP. We have decided it shouldn't, which I agree with. From 2009 to 2023, healthcare was flat as a percent of GDP for those 15 years. And what that created was this enormous pressure on any part of the ecosystem. You're saying deliver more services in a fixed pool, effectively. So the expense trend and the revenue trend right now for health systems is just out of whack.
The health system people hate the payers and the payers hate pharma. It's literally everybody's just hating each other and none of it's good. None of it's working for us.
One of the destructive forces in the industry right now is aggressive finger pointing. The patient doesn't care. They are not being served well. It is everybody's fault. We all need to listen better. We need to collaborate better.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Another episode of Lifers. And we have had such a diverse set of guests recently. Everybody from folks on the operator entrepreneurship side of things, all the way now through to the health system perspective, which I'm very excited to dig into. I've got my co-host back with me, Mike Desjadon from Anomaly. Thanks very much. And it's so good to have you back. You had so much fun on the episode with Boris Bakari, which I hope you will all tune into. So I am going to let you introduce our very special guest today because you are longtime friends and industry contacts. So tell us a little bit more about how you know each other and give us an intro.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chrissy. I am thrilled today to have my good friend, Niyum Gandhi, the CFO of Mass General Brigham, up in probably cold, I don't know if it's snowy yet, Boston, Massachusetts. Niyum, welcome to the podcast. I'm incredibly excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Mike and Chrissy. Really appreciate it.
Nia, Mike, how do you two actually know each other? How did you meet?
All right, Mike, go for it. You want the PG version? So back in the day, a long time ago now, I was at the advisory board company. I worked there for the better part of 15 years, and I ran our East Coast health system partnerships. In fact, I've got our old company core values here. Spirit of generosity was one of them, which actually plays into my meeting with Niyum. I had recently taken over the advisory board's relationship with Mount Sinai, Niyum's previous stomping grounds, even though he was never a New Yorker. We'll talk about that.
Wait, did you sell to him? Were you trying to sell to him, Mike?
No, I was more responsible for maybe cleaning up a little bit of a mess and rekindling the fires of a relationship. Actually, you and I both inherited a relationship.
That's the key. We inherited, he took over the Mount Sinai account. I came in as a new executive overseeing the work that the advisory board is helping us with. And we'll just go ahead and blame whoever our predecessors were or whoever else. There was not adequate communication and coordination between the teams, and the relationship was not in a great spot. Mike came in on day one in the conversation with me and was like, yeah, so I don't think we're doing a great job serving you, and it's my job to fix that, which is pretty awesome and pretty humble for somebody to, come in on day one rather than, oh yeah, we need to sell you more.
So I'm going to throw that back to you and say, would it be a really good marketing strategy for a health system payer, like whomever you want to say in the system, to use that exact same language to a patient and say, hey, we are not doing a great job serving you. It is our job to come in and fix that. Because we don't see it, right?
There are a lot of people who I think we've been conditioned maybe that we need to defend ourselves rather than admitting our mistakes, right? And I think that's absolutely true. And I'm sure you've met physicians who do that. When something is not working, they say like, hey, we're not doing a great job here and I'm going to make it better.
On the business side, it's not an easy thing to do for lots of reasons, but I actually think healthcare is pretty ripe for it. It is the most human of all industries, right? We are executives, maybe on different sides of healthcare, but we're also patients. We have families, right? You feel the business that you're in, and whether it's as a health executive, myself working for a commercial entity in the advisory board company, at the end of the day, the end result of our relationship might impact us as patients. In fact, one of the groundings of our relationship is Mount Sinai had back in the day performed a very rare surgery on my grandfather that gave him 15 extra years of quality life, which coming into it where I had a commercial reason for being in Mount Sinai, but this was also the same Mount Sinai that had saved my grandfather. And so I just think healthcare presents itself as a different industry than maybe other industries where you'd have someone like a Niyum out in the ether. I think healthcare actually has an opportunity to kind of have that human interaction.
Niyum, I feel like I've got to acknowledge the elephant in the room here, which is for those of you who are not tuning in by video and are tuning in on audio, you may not have noticed that Niyum is quite a young guy, but he's also the chief financial officer and treasurer of Mass General Brigham. And I usually see people, I would just say more mature, because we don't want to be ageist, but maybe slightly more mature in years in these sorts of roles. So tell us how you were able to make that ascendancy in your career. How were you able to get up to that level as young as you have done? What is your career path?
Started in professional services and in client services. I was a consultant for a long time at Oliver Wyman. I started right out of college, and I still maintain to people who are thinking about early part of their career, it's the whole better lucky than good thing. I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, I guess I'll do consulting because I'm not good at anything and don't know anything, and I'll learn from people. I got this great advice from a mentor of mine who said, look, you're going to have to make career decisions based on a whole bunch of different criteria over your career. And he said, until you're at least 30, and I'd encourage you to take it even further than that, make your decisions based on only one thing, where you can learn the most. And he said, don't take the higher paying job necessarily. Don't take the one that gives you better balance. Just learn. And so I thought I would do consulting for a couple of years. I ended up doing it for a decade. Was a partner at Oliver Wyman when I left. And each move from there was like really right place, right time. The other thing that I often tell folks earlier in their career is have a plan and then throw it out. I was a second year partner. I was thrilled. I was like, oh yeah, great. I'm, doing great work here. Had the consultant stream of a pitch meeting with the CEO of Mount Sinai and his leadership team. He called me the next day. It was on population health topics. He called me and said, we're really impressed with what you talked about. And so I went straight into my pitch thinking, oh, great, I'm going to make my numbers on this account this year. And he interrupted and said, no, I'm so sorry. You misunderstood me. I hate consultants. And I was like, oh, and I'm just thinking like, you called me. And he said, but I really liked you. And we have this position open. That's the chief population health officer. It reports directly to me. It has all the clinical programs for our shift to value-based care. It has contracting with the payers, and it has whatever else you tell me it needs to succeed. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. If I have been advising people on these topics, health plans, health systems on this for a decade, and presumably have learned at least a little bit, I should put my money where my mouth is and bet on myself and, try to take the operational role. And so did that, interviewed for that job, got it, loved it. That's when I met Mike. And then 5 years later, walked into his office one day and he said, so I have something that's on my agenda that's probably not on yours, which is a little bit of a scary thing to hear from your boss. And Mike, Ken, this is Ken Davis, who took Mount Sinai from the brink of disaster in the early 2000s and turned it into what it is today. I mean, like without that man, that organization wouldn't exist. Visionary leader, brilliant, learned so much from him. And he told me that our longtime CFO was retiring. And I thought he was going to ask me to help him find somebody, because he also, in addition to not liking consultants, he did not like search firms. And so I'd started to think about it. And then he just says, I want you to do it. And I looked at him like he was a crazy person, and said, well, Ken, I've never even taken an accounting class, which is true. And he said, that's fine. We have a lot of great accountants. They'll do good work for you. I want a strategy person who knows numbers. And so unfortunately, I took over on March 2nd, 2020. Some stuff was happening in the world. A year and a half later, made the transition up here to Mass General Brigham. But been fortunate to be in, again, kind of right place at the right time. And I think it is part of what's maybe the prototype of what's needed in healthcare leadership. It has shifted from deep expertise to other things over time, which makes sense as the industry has matured. Mike, you've probably seen that as well as you've worked with people across the industry.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things I want to chat about before we move off of this, this being lifers, and Chris wanted to know where we met. You and I are obviously friends, and there was an interaction that we'd had in Washington, D.C. We're having a drink at a bar when Niyum was transitioning roles, and I was leaving the advisor board company, which was Optum. It was after the Optum acquisition. I stayed for about a year. And we were both at career choice points. I was contemplating leaving healthcare's largest company in Optum and moving to startups. Niyum was contemplating moving from Pop Health to CFO and then from Sinai, and Brigham. And we were talking just about career paths. Like, what do we do? Right? We both were recovered consultants. I think I've moved through step 11 into step 12. No one consults me for things anymore. And I'm sure you're probably still not
I
quite.
consult you, Mike. Maybe not on like the right things, but how do I potty train my son? Call Mike.
Let's fly with whatever diaper he can get. So I'm definitely not going to help you on that one, unless you don't care about your floors, but that's a conversation for a different time.
A different podcast.
Different podcast. Yeah, that's our other podcast. Different kind of life, different lifers. But you said something that really stuck with me, and I've used when I look to hire people today. And we were talking about, like, even do we stay in healthcare? Like, someone like you've got opportunities to do whatever you want, right? And you said to me, what I say to all my friends is, if you're not unbelievably passionate, and I mean unbelievably passionate about something else, why not healthcare? Where better to dedicate a career? And you said that to me it was still our first drink, so I know you meant it. And it really stuck with me. It was one of the more meaningful things I've heard, friend or other. And I'd like you to pick that one a little bit, because you have dedicated your life to this industry and at great sacrifice, lots of travel, lots of moving. People think C-level title at big health system glamour, but you've really put some blood, sweat, and tears into that. And I know it's core to who you are, and I'd love you to unpick that one a little bit.
Yeah. My first couple of years of my career, I was a generalist. I had no clue what I was doing. I was infected by the passion of the healthcare partners at Oliver Wyman who I was working with. I could see they were not interested in the work because it was the biggest sector of the economy. They were not interested in the work because it was the fastest growing. They were not nearly as commercially motivated as their colleagues in, the retail industry or in the financial services industry. You got to sell work to pay the bills, to pay the staff, commercially minded up, but they were so focused on impact. And when I remember when I was a new principal, we actually had a retreat of our health system practice to have a conversation about how we would prioritize opportunities for clients to work with. And we had to do one of those like forced exercises of like, you have 100 points to allocate towards different things. And it was, kind of generating commercial value for the firm, having client impact. So a client where you can have big impact on that individual company, and then having market impact. And it ended up with 60% of the points on market impact across all of us. And that actually drove the type of work that we would do. We would, as partners, effectively take a pay cut by selling work that was a lower margin to clients that we thought could shape the market in a certain way toward greater value, towards greater affordability, towards higher quality in a different way, towards a different collaboration model at, financial. And this, I can't take credit for this. This was the senior partners driving it and me learning from them, and very clearly make less money because we were focused on that. And it really clicked for me that healthcare is an industry where the vast majority of people who work in healthcare work there because they want to make a difference. Like, being a doctor is a hard job. It is not rewarding in many ways. It is incredibly frustrating. You start with a mountain of debt. My brother and sister-in-law are both physicians. I remember when I was a first-year consultant, I was making as much money as they were both as residents together, which is crazy that coming out of med school, we pay residents like $30,000, whatever, at that time. And they had more than $500,000 of debt between the two of them. And I'm like, they are literally going in and saving lives. And, and so nurses, really tough job. Like all people who work in healthcare work in it because they want to make a difference. And that's not to say other industries are easy or a cakewalk or whatever else. But if you work around people like that, it brings a different type of joy. Everybody I know who works in healthcare has a moment when they realized, I want to be in the industry. And rarely was it anything besides like, I like the people, I like the values, I like the fact that we can have impact, and I'm not a doctor. I can't go in and use my hands to save a patient, but can I invest my time and energy, my team's time and energy to make their lives a little better, to help the people who are delivering care, deliver a little bit better care, to be part of the care team in that way. I can do that in this industry. I couldn't do that in, again, no criticism to people working in retail or technology or transportation or whatever else, but I think there's some joy to be found here.
I love that. And I totally agree with them. It's the thesis behind this podcast.
Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the conversation after a word from our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Arbiter, the care orchestration platform. In a healthcare system full of silos, Arbiter is a unifying layer. Backed by one of the largest early funding rounds in health tech history, Arbiter brings payers, providers, and patients together on one intelligent platform, routing referrals to the best in-network option, managing authorizations and outreach, and coordinating appointments seamlessly. See how it works at arbiter.ai.
So I'm going to shift a little bit just to focusing on the role that you have now, because I think it's so important in the moment that we're in, and Mike would agree with this, to understand what is going on for health systems today, where, it feels like there are so many, to borrow a medical term, code red problems, like really big problems. Mike mentioned to me that the subsidies have expired. That to me would be a code red problem. We're seeing a lot of funding go towards rural health, but to me, that's to address another code red problem. I think one of the surprising things about health systems is that many of us believe on the patient side that the majority of hospitals must be just swimming in cash, because our experience of going to the ER is that it is a very expensive bill. And yet, when you sort of peek under the hood, many hospitals it's the exact opposite. Many hospitals kind of moving into the red. What's going on with these subsidies, which we'll talk about, is going to accelerate that, with all these newly non-insured people kind of running into emergency rooms. And guess what? It's those physicians and nurses that you mentioned that will continue to be treating them, whether or not these people have insurance or any funds to pay for any of the care they receive. So I would love for you to set the stage for us a little bit of what is going on in 2026. And then, if I'm somebody listening to this podcast who's thinking, I've got a meeting with a health system next week, what are some of the things that you would want to hear about from, say, a company pitching you about these code red kind of things on your mind? And what might be some of the solutions that are on your mind?
So I think there's maybe two kind of grounding issues that I see. One that's kind of always existed and one that is new in the past 5 years, which is why these code red problems are code red and not code yellow. These sorts of things happen, and I think they were always just kind of an issue, and now they're catastrophic. So that the general principle, which is not meant as a political statement, like it's maybe more of a health policy statement, as we think about any good, but certainly in healthcare, it's like high quality, affordable, and everybody can have whatever the heck they want. Pick two. And every other country has picked quality and affordability and explicitly rations care for everybody, not just for the poor, rations care for everybody. We have picked quality and everybody can have whatever they want and punted on affordability. That was a policy decision that was made many years ago. There are a whole bunch of issues with that. We can have that conversation if we want to. What that's created is effectively, as the population has aged, as Medicaid has expanded, more than half of the population is covered by the government. Macroeconomically, almost cost disease industries, services industries grow faster than products industries as a percent of GDP, definitionally, because they don't have the same efficiency gains. So healthcare, macroeconomically, should grow faster than GDP. We have decided it shouldn't, which I agree with. From 2009 to 2023, healthcare was flat as a percent of GDP for those 15 years. And what that created was this enormous pressure on any part of the ecosystem. So whether it's a doctor or pharma company or health plan or whatever, you're saying deliver more services in a fixed pool, effectively. So the expense trend and the revenue trend right now for health systems is just out of whack. Now, how was it solved in the past? Until the early 80s, we were paid cost plus. Then there were some efficiency gains. Then we priced our way out of it. In the 90s, that's how healthcare got unaffordable. Hospitals and doctors priced their way out of it. That was a problem. And then in the 2010s, we just had no inflation. 1.2, 1.3% inflation average for a decade. That's never happened in the history of capitalism. You never had that. So we had this great decade. And then massive inflation in 22, 23. Now we're back down more reasonable, but it's still, 4. If your wages for employees, and most of what we do is services, so most of our costs are labor, are going up at 4 or 5%. For nurses, let's say, we have $2 billion of nursing costs. and your revenue per unit of service is going up at 1. Like in our state, we have commercial rate regulations. So 2.5%, 3% on commercial, 0.5, 1 on the government side. Maybe it averages to 1.5. That's a 2 to 3% gap of your expense trend and your revenue trend every year. Can you get 1% more efficient every year? Sure. Can you get 2 or 3% more efficient every single year in perpetuity? I think what we're seeing is no, right? There's a reason 2022 was the worst financial year for 76% of licensed hospitals in their history, not in a decade or two, ever. And 23 was the second worst. And so, we're seeing all these hospital bankruptcies. We're seeing, even the health systems that are doing a little bit better are still 1, 2, 3, 4% off of financially where they were in the past. Well over half of hospitals operating in the red. And so that's kind of the driver of it. So every little thing is the straw that broke the camel's back. So then, what's the opportunity? I think anything that changes the productivity function is the opportunity. Because, and going back to kind of macroeconomics, bonus cost disease, the services industries go fast because there aren't productivity gains. So I'm actually, not to sound Pollyannish, I'm excited about the opportunities over the next 5, 10, 15 years on what AI can do. Can we have technology labor substitution at scale over a period of time that allow us to meet more of that promise of high quality, and still people can have what they want without rationing of care at a more affordable price point, more reasonably, getting the underlying cost structure under control, working together on that. So when I talk to, CEO of an early stage company or a venture fund or a PE fund, and they say, hey, what are the things that are of interest to you? Anything that can change the productivity function at scale is where I see the most promise.
So I think 2026 is my prediction. We're going to start seeing more examples of autonomous care delivery. And when I say autonomous, I mean self-governing. I don't mean, doing a bit of efficiency in the background. I actually mean the AI is doing real care delivery, whether it be screening, diagnosis, even applications of treatment. I think we'll start to see in 26, probably in pockets, probably more experimental. But that feels like it's coming, and it's definitely going to be a whole new way of administering care. I think in 2025, you saw the rise of the Abridges of the world and the Nuances of the world that, in theory made physicians and care teams a lot more productive. I used the term productivity. I think it was interesting I chatted with the health system president last week, and I said, how are you paying for it? And he said, I'm asking my physicians to do one more visit. And if you could do one more patient visit, I will give you a bridge, because there isn't really any other way to pay for it. Otherwise, it's just a pure cost. Essentially, what you have to do is just bill more, right? But that was the offer. And a lot of physicians within that health system took him up on it and said, yes, I will do one more visit in exchange for having access to something like an abridge. So would love to hear from you about just where you see 2025 through 2026 going with your physicians, your care teams, what kind of technology they will be using for productivity, and then how is it going to get paid for if it's not a simple kind of thing where you can just reimburse, right, through a payer? What do you see the reimbursement mechanisms looking like?
It's a great question. Maybe just a quick note on the ambient documentation. And for those who were watching on video, you saw me make a little bit of a face when you mentioned the one extra visit. I had a conversation, it was almost exactly 3 years ago, with our CIO at the time, who's a physician, Adam Landman, who's awesome and brilliant. And he came to me and he said, we just finished our first pilot using ambient documentation. We did, 100 docs, 50 on one product, 50 on another. And he said, I'm working on a business case for how we could pay for it, right? And he was going to look at squeezing in an extra visit and some other things and whatever. And my answer to him, I was like, don't. And he said, oh, he was deflated. He thought I was going to say, look, we're not doing it. I said, look, Adam, we've got 7,000 physicians who practice in an ambulatory setting. He walked me through what he had negotiated from a price standpoint. So I just multiplied it out and I was like, we're talking $7-8 million. We're $18 billion company at the time. I was like, we're doing it. And the COO and I will find a place to take out $8 million other dollars. Like we will figure it out. But if you ask me what the ROI is on ambient documentation, is the more recent studies have shown self-reported burnout is down over 50%. Burnt out physicians commit twice as many medical errors. It pays for itself in quality alone. And I don't mean dollars of quality. I mean, we're here to deliver care.
Sure.
So, yeah, I would say the other issue is if physicians were living a really healthy work-life balance, I would say, yes, absolutely squeeze in an extra patient. But like, they're coming in, slogging through the whole day, going home and charting for 4 hours. It's like, oh, that is brutal. We owe them the first down payment on reducing it. Now, as more and more tools come out and make their pre-visit planning better, make chart summarization better, and that's where I'm seeing more coming out now. Could there be a lift? Yes. Incidentally, anecdotally, I hear from some of our physicians, they see the extra patient anyway. They don't add it to their template. But when a colleague calls them and says, hey, I have this patient who I think really needs to be seen. Or one of our cardiologists who I talked to on our inpatient service, she said her worst days are when she has a patient with an MI, post-heart attack on the unit. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's got to be your bread and butter. And she said, no, I'm spending the entire days that they're here calling all of my friends who are outpatient cardiologists, seeing who will squeeze this person in because the access is terrible. Nobody has availability. And so it's like if one cardiologist is willing to say, yeah, double book me at 8 a.m. because they know that they can get through the visits a little faster. Yes, and there will be some revenue from that too. I think we've had such negative productivity gains, like degradation of productivity from most of the technology we've implemented. We got to do right by, again, making that first down payment for them. And then, yes, absolutely. I think chart summarization, next best action, all that stuff is live in some places, coming out in others. And then I agree with you, Chrissy, on autonomous care delivery. I think that'll be really exciting as it happens, as long as we figure out the right ways to ensure that it's done effectively. And you already see it in certain areas. On diagnostics, AI is doing so much of the reading of the scan and the radiologist is just signing off on it or,
When you think about like that's one of the things you said there that's really interesting was maybe a little bit different than I thought you were going to answer on kind of the ROI for some of these AI tools. And I'd love you to unpack this one for me a little bit. So when you think about the different areas where you're going to be looking for productivity gains, you're going to have to be looking at companies big and small, right? And I think some of the companies that are going to be providing some of these solutions aren't big, well-known household names. And health systems, have like traditionally wanted to consolidate vendors, right? Like how many things can I get from a single vendor? If you can give me 12 B+ solutions, I'd rather that than trying to figure out all the different B+. But we're so early into AI, the odds that you'll find all those places from one vendor on a timeline are pretty low. And I had an experience that I'd love to hear from you. One of our customers, who I can't name, but our company's in the revenue cycle space, and we're very proud of the fact that we can, using MAP, literally tell you what the dollar ROI would be. And we're willing to contract that way. And the CFO of this health system said, if I contracted with you like that, I'd have to treat you like that. But that's not why I'm choosing to work with you. I don't actually know what the horizons for my productivity gains are 3 years from now, but I know that doing what I'm doing isn't going to get me there. And so I'm willing to take the leap with a partner. And here's what I'm willing to pay for that leap, knowing that I am taking a little bit of a leap into the unknown. I've been doing this a long time. I've never really heard that before. One, you think like we have all of the X's, right? It's like small vendor, X. We don't have 50 health system customers. Okay, I can't call 50 people I know, X. Oh, but they went for it. And it's been a great relationship. And it strikes me because, not to be negative on our space, but most of the companies, even like my own, don't have 7-year track records of ROI. And we're selling into an industry that I think it's a bad knock for not being innovative. I think healthcare is tremendously innovative, but your first rule is do no harm. And so you have a world where you're stepping into new technologies with unproven companies, maybe proven people, but unproven companies under a mantra of do no harm, but you need to make a shift because, to your point, kind of the negative productivity impacts are crushing ultimately affordability, which is now on the news every single day. So you've got all of those things in this elixir, and you are the CFO that has to make sense of this. Like, how do you think about that?
On the technology side, it's interesting. I actually agree with that other individual. We just need to pick the places where we make the bets, right? Mm-hmm. So there are 10,000 places where you could have a point solution. Do we want 10,000 point solutions? No, we would actually degrade affordability because we would crumble under our own weight from a IT integration standpoint.
Sure.
Can we pick the 20 where we do want a point solution, where we can get an A or an A plus quickly, or a B plus and our platform company has nothing, right? The Epic or the Snowflake or the Workday or whatever your core system is for anything has nothing. You innovate with somebody else because within 3 or 4 years, your core platform company will catch up to that. Now, catch up to where the innovator started. Now, will the innovator keep their gains? Right, is a question. How much? What is the value of 3 years in an A versus an A minus? What is the value of having a solution for 2 years versus not having a solution? Right, and so you need to pick that. But I actually rarely find 7-year track record of ROI in an independent company, because if there's 7-year track record of ROI, they've been bought by Optum or by somebody else, right? And then they are integrated into on platform. I say that somewhat joking. No, but I think that's actually the play. Find the places where you want to innovate with somebody, where you want to be customer 2 or 3 or partner 1 or whatever. But rarely do I find that we're partner 37.
Yes.
But if we're partner 37, it's because the on-platform company that we work with has acquired the solution and rolls it out.
So I guess another macro question. This conversation is like so needed right now, but I'm just going to go there and say the startups have felt very burned by the health systems because 15, 20 years ago, they came to you with all these great ideas and the health system said, cool, here's a free pilot. And then they died because the free pilots went nowhere, the venture funding dried up. And what happened was we then saw a whole new wave of healthcare startups ignore healthcare systems, and they moved to pharma IT, they moved to the payer, they even moved to the patient, started embracing direct-to-consumer models, but stayed very far away from the health system because they learned their lesson. And I do occasionally hear now from the odd kind of health system CIO, like, oh, we kind of want them back because some of them were actually pretty good. And, maybe we need some of these innovators to solve the problems. And I think now one could argue that AI is actually solving or has the potential to solve some of the productivity issues that you mentioned as your code red issues. How do you solve that institutional hesitation and I think distrust on both sides?
There's 2 issues. One, I never did free pilots for that reason, right? And I would talk to groups of early stage companies and just say, like, if your solution spans a bunch of different user types, don't sell to health systems. Our sales cycle will last longer than the money from your A round.
That's true.
Don't. And then part of that is also in that time period, right? Kind of call it 2012 to 2018. A lot of it was digital health. And the problem there was the payment model. These companies were built to serve somebody who was going to pay for some sort of care, diabetes monitoring, telebehavioral health, whatever. They would start with self-funded employers as point solutions there. And they would come to health systems and say, we can help you perform better in your risk contracts with this digital health solution. It's just like, it's wonky from a financial standpoint. So I'm going to prepay you for something to save money on a contract that I get trued up sometimes 9 months in arrears, if I'm lucky. I think that was part of these health systems were committing malpractice by saying yes to the free pilots, that we're never going to generate the right integration and the right clinical integration. Because when you're a point solution going to an employer and you say, I've got digital monitoring for diabetes, you don't need to worry about the employer's endocrinologists because they don't have it. And you come to a health system, we're not going to work with a digital diabetes startup unless our chief of endocrinology gives it full-throated support, because ultimately the chief of endocrinology is held responsible for the quality of that care. So yeah, you could say, oh, we're stuck in the mud and backwards. You could also say wrong audience for the solution. I think what we're seeing now, you look at these ambient documentation companies, they got massive traction. If you have a great product that has material impact on the patients that need to be served or the people providing the care, you'll figure out a way to succeed. I think the issue was that push of digital health to say we're going to go sell to health systems. I think that was the big miss. And then on us for saying yes, right? Mike, because we've had this conversation about some specific companies where I was like, do not sell to health systems. Like, you You just raised $37 million. You will burn through the 37 before you get through cyber review with me.
Ain't that the truth?
It's one of those things too, where it's like, I remember before I went into venture, I was like, 37 million, that's a lot of money. And now I'm like, oh, I can see how this company is burning $1 million a month and not profitable, and how quickly that runs out.
You probably have relationships both personally and from a corporate perspective with a number of PE firms and venture firms. What conversations do you have with them about that? I'm sure they ask you, when you think about capitalizing a startup, you have a 14-month sales cycle period. I mean, there are always the health systems that will say yes to a 4-month chunk of business for a number of their venture portfolios, but that's not scale. And I think what venture, if they're being honest, sees my space for sure in the revenue cycle space, you see a lot of companies race out to 20 million in revenue and then die because they've proven they can sell to venture companies like partnered health systems and nobody else. There are a few venture companies that are capitalizing their companies to last the long haul, that 14 to 18 month sales cycle. But how would you like to see that change as either an individual or a health system that partners with venture? Like, what would you tell them? Like, hey, bring us companies that look like this. The companies need to be built to last for this. What would you like to see change? And you seem quite bullish on this run of companies, or at least capabilities, being able to help health systems. Where do you think are the most promising areas for young founders who might be listening to really focus?
I kind of put it in two categories. Are you going to be a vendor, or are you actually going to be a partner? And also, if you're going to be a vendor, admit you're going to be a vendor. Nothing bothers me more than vendors who say, we're your partner. You're wrong. If I'm paying you money in exchange for services, you're a vendor. That's okay. That's not a pejorative, but understand what you want to be. If you want to be a venture-backed vendor in and serve health systems, you need to raise a lot of money. You just have to, and you have to have an industrial grade product pretty quickly. There are ways to de-risk that. Start with physician groups. In the finance space, outside of RevCycle, like in FP&A, there are a couple of cool AI FP&A companies I've met that do financial planning and analysis. Their first 8, 10, 15 contracts are all with mid-sized to large physician groups. Makes perfect sense, right? Get enough revenue, cash flow flowing to keep funding your innovation with small companies, small contract size. Invest in the commercial sales model. You're not going and getting, somebody like Mike, you were 5, years ago to come in and be your big hitter who knows every health system. You are getting feet on the street salespeople, right? It's a completely different commercial model. Build scrappy, nimble, get to cash flow break even, demonstrate that you can do that, and then raise some growth money. If you're going to be a vendor, I think you have to either do something like that, or you got to raise an enormous amount of money, like a Bridge or Ambient did, right? They said, we think we can go hard. We're going to raise an enormous amount of money. We're going to get to a great product quickly. And there's going to be a fight for market share. We're going to go get it. So if you're going to be a partner, I think there are a bunch of other ways to do it. And I love tech-enabled service stack rather than tech vendor. I've always liked that model. And going back to, early days when I was at Mount Sinai and we wanted a partner on insurance stuff. We didn't have an insurance company here. We have our own insurance company, but it was why we did a deal with Oscar as a tech-enabled service player, right? And we co-branded, co-launched a product and had, I thought, great impact because they were bringing a full tech stack and services. Or right now, in full disclosure, we're an investor, but K Health, love that company, right? Because it's not AI for primary care. It is AI-enabled primary care with the full model, the full commercial model in a JV structure where we're setting up a physician group in partnership with them and we're sharing in the economics of it, rather than them saying, we have this great technology that your PCPs can use if you pay us $10 million a year, which that's a really different sale. And it allowed us to move fast. We moved really fast with them and liked it so much that we made an investment. And we've done that in other spaces as well. But I think that requires you to build a really good, not just technical model, but operational model and financial model. I think a lot of people just focus on the technical model. An A+ technical model with a B- operational model and a C- financial model, that's a bankrupt company, right? And an A+ financial model with a B+ operational model and a C+ technical model has 3 years to get the technical model right.
I couldn't agree more with that. I feel like there's still so much more to unpack. So I feel like we definitely need a part 2. So you have to come back.
Anytime.
Yeah, I haven't even asked you how to fix health.
Good thing I don't know the answer. So that's why I filibuster to not get to that question.
Which is why I'm going to put you on the spot. I think everybody in this room, there's 3 of us here, would love for each one of us to get a wave a magic wand moment, 2026, something that you can do, one thing. And, you actually get to wave that wand and it happens. What is it? I'm going to start with you, Mike.
I get to wave a magic wand and anything in healthcare happens.
Anything happens. You're the boss.
I'm the boss. I would want to see 15% more college graduates dump into healthcare professions. And I'd love to see more partnership at the high school and trade school level to get more people into healthcare. I think partnerships with schools, not medical schools, not necessarily clinical education, but partnerships with schools to get more people good healthcare jobs. Counterintuitive to the AI productivity conversation, but we're going to need different workforce than we have right now, kind of up and down healthcare, fewer in some places, more in others. If I had to wave a magic wand, it would be that.
Yeah.
Can I get 2 different answers? Because my first one's too audacious. I'm just prepping with that. So my first one is start over. The old Paul Batalden quote, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. This isn't a system. It is a series of 1,000, 10,000, million small decisions made over different periods of time under different constraint models with no cohesive vision of what a healthcare system would be. Start over. I think we have enough smart people in the industry to come up with a system that would make sense if we started from a white sheet of paper. That's a little too audacious. So I would instead say I would want everybody in the industry to, if we were grading people on a letter grade of like A through F, to go up 2 letter grades on humility and listening. Because I think one of the destructive forces in the industry right now is aggressive finger pointing. It is the payer saying pharma's the problem, pharma saying hospitals are the problem, hospitals saying payers are the problem. The patient doesn't care. They are not being served well. It is everybody's fault. We all need to listen better. We need to collaborate better. If there were an easy answer and one player were the problem, it would have been fixed already. It's not that simple. I may not be that smart, but collectively as 20% of the working workforce, we're not all a bunch of idiots.
I'm going to jump off of yours, I think, with mine. We had Sachin Jain on this podcast recently, who I love, CEO of Scan, and comes out of the health plan world. And he's got this whole shtick where he says healthcare is a toxic positivity problem, because most people want to just go on stage and talk about innovation, right? And not acknowledge. But at the same time, I think you're dead on about it's just finger pointing. When you catch people privately over a glass of wine, then the health system people hate the payers and the payers hate pharma. It's literally everybody's just hating each other. And I agree with it. None of it's good. None of it's working for us. So maybe I would love to just somehow find a way to just get people to be really honest and transparent about what is actually going on. Because it's not that it's any one player that's bad. It's like you said, it's incentives. And we've created a system, if you could even call it that it's all the incentives are wrong. Even when we tried to fix access, cost is now an out of control problem, just going to keep going up because nobody is incentivized to care about cost. So I think for me, it would be more outspoken humans in healthcare who may sit in their corner a bit, but will tell you the truth about what's really going on. And I think we can start to think about some realistic solutions that could work. I'll leave it there and make a call for bold, courageous, outspoken transparency in 2026.
If you went to the existing people having more humility and listening, I went for forget all the people, bring in new people.
Love it. Mike's definitely not got a toxic positivity problem.
Yeah, exactly. Burn the place down, bringing new people.
That's why we want him as a co-host. I'll just say thank you. And you both have got to come back. We're going to do a part 2 because we have so many more questions. It is not common that we get to talk with a health system CFO. And yeah, this was fantastic. Thanks to both of you. That's a wrap on Lifers. If you know someone else grinding it out in healthcare, send them this episode. And if you want more unfiltered takes on digital health, check out the Second Opinion newsletter, link in the show notes.